Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Bold and Beautiful. Today. Do not follow me to Italy. Ridge rejects Taylor's invitation to accompany him in fury. Eric tells Nick to back off as Brooke responds to Taylor's warning. As Nick Marone is told to back off by Eric Forrester, Brooke Logan will respond to Taylor Hayes' warning. Taylor chose to confront Brooke by herself after she overheard her making yet another move for Ridge Forrester. Taylor then made it very apparent that Ridge was unavailable and insisted that nothing would stand in their way. We should see Brooke's response to Taylor's outburst on Monday's B&B episode. Taylor claims that she and Ridge have a bright future, but Brooke won't be so certain. Brooke is likely to irritate Taylor by highlighting her past relationship with Ridge and how frequently they have reconnected. Taylor can become even more agitated once Brooke makes the point that Italy can be a lovely place. Regarding Eric, he will speak with Nick in a heated manner. Eric doesn't want Nick to make things worse since he wants Brooke and Ridge to have a happy ending. Ridge will most likely inform Nick that his own Brooke reunion is unlikely to occur now that Eric has been pressuring him to get back together with Brooke before it's too late. Regarding the future of Brooke and Ridge, Eric will continue to believe in the force of fate. For this reason, Eric will try to dissuade Nick from pursuing Brooke. Nick won't be eager to follow Eric's suggestion because he doesn't let other people tell him what to do. Instead, once the Italy trip starts, Nick will make some unexpected decisions to show that he is Brooke's best man. Even though Nick intends to persuade Brooke to be married, a few unexpected events may disrupt his next plan. As terrible news breaks, Nick will need to provide some updates along the way. Brooke Logan liked the expensive silk of her blouse. Taylor's words, delivered with the brittle certainty of someone clinging desperately to a mirage, had landed not as a definitive barrier but as a gauntlet thrown, a challenge igniting the familiar, indomitable spark within Brooke. Taylor's declaration, that Ridge was categorically unavailable, that nothing would come between their rekindled Italian romance, hadn't instilled fear or resignation in Brooke. Instead, it ricocheted off the hardened shell of her decades-long certainty in her connection with Ridge Forrester, striking flint to tinder. Brooke's immediate reaction wasn't one of wounded retreat but of incandescent disbelief, a silent, furious rejection of Taylor's narrative. How dare Taylor, after everything, after all the times Ridge had returned to her, Brooke, like a compass finding true north, stand there issuing possessive ultimatums? Brooke saw not strength in Taylor's warning, but the hairline fractures in her confidence, the tremulous fear underlying the forceful pronouncement. Taylor's insistence on an unassailable future with Ridge felt less like a prophecy and more like a desperate incantation, a spell whispered against the persistent gravitational pull Brooke knew Ridge still felt. Brooke wasn't convinced for a single, solitary moment that Taylor's hold was secure. She knew Ridge's restless heart, his history of seeking solace and passion in her arms whenever turbulence struck elsewhere. This wasn't over. Taylor's outburst merely confirmed the battlefield was still active, and Brooke, far from surrendering, felt the old, familiar adrenaline of the fight surge through her veins. Her reaction was a silent vow. Taylor Hayes might have drawn a line in the sand, but Brooke Logan was already contemplating how to dance right over it, her gaze fixed not on the obstacle, but on the prize, Ridge Forrester, a man whose destiny, in her unshakable belief, was eternally intertwined with hers. Brooke's response, therefore, wouldn't be meek acceptance, it would be a masterclass in psychological warfare, meticulously designed to exploit the very insecurities Taylor had tried so hard to mask. With the calculated precision honed over years of romantic skirmishes, Brooke would counter Taylor's brittle certainty not with denial, but with the overwhelming, undeniable weight of history. She would play each shared moment with Ridge like a virtuoso, a symphony of stolen glances, passionate reunions, and unbreakable bonds that resonated through the decades. Secure, Taylor? Brooke might retort, her voice a dangerous blend of sweetness and steel. Like when he left you at the altar? Like when he chose me time and time again, even after children, after marriages, after you? Each pointed reminder would be a tiny hammer blow against the facade Taylor was trying to maintain. Brooke would evoke specific memories, the longing in Ridge's eyes during their countless separations, the magnetic pull that always drew them back together, the undeniable fact that she was his Logan, his destiny, as he'd so often proclaimed. And then, with the lethal subtlety of a stiletto slipping between ribs, Brooke would invoke Italy itself. "Italy is magical, isn't it, Taylor?" she might muse, her eyes holding a knowing glint. "A place where hearts open, and sometimes rediscover old paths. Ridge and we've always found magic in unexpected places. Remember Paris? Remember Monte Carlo?" The implication wouldn't be a direct threat, but a haunting specter, the possibility that the very romantic setting Taylor thought secured her triumph could become the stage for Ridge's inevitable return to Brooke. This verbal assault, cloaked in the guise of reminiscing, was designed not just to rile Taylor, but to plant insidious seeds of doubt that would fester and grow, transforming Taylor's confidence into a fragile, watchful anxiety, constantly scanning Ridge for signs of Brooke's lingering influence. Brooke's reaction was thus a declaration: she wouldn't fight Taylor's claim head-on, she would undermine its foundation, brick by painful brick, using the very history Taylor wished to erase as her most potent weapon. While Brooke sharpened her verbal knives for Taylor, the patriarch of the Forrester dynasty, Eric, was mobilizing his considerable influence on another front, his focus laser-sharp on eliminating what he perceived as a dangerous complication. Nick Marone. Eric, ever the architect of his vision for family harmony and legacy, remained the staunchest advocate for the Brooke Ridge epic. To him, their tumultuous love story wasn't chaos, it was destiny manifest, the core narrative around which the Forrester universe rightly orbited. Nick's persistent pursuit of Brooke, his attempts to carve out a space for himself within this sacred dynamic, wasn't just inconvenient, it was a sacrilege, a disruption of the natural order Eric was determined to preserve. Seeing Nick as an interloper muddying already turbulent waters, Eric sought him out, the weight of his authority and paternal concern settling heavily around them. The conversation crackled with unspoken tension, Eric, embodying the imposing Forrester legacy, and Nick, the defiant outsider who'd never bowed easily to anyone. Eric's message was unequivocal, delivered not as a request but as a command forged in decades of experience and unwavering belief: back off, Nick. He laid bare his agenda, confirming he'd been actively pushing Ridge towards a reunion with Brooke before the fragile window of opportunity slammed shut. "This isn't your fight," Eric would assert, his voice carrying the gravity of finality. "Brooke and Ridge belong together. It's written in the stars, it's the only ending that makes sense for them, for this family, for everyone." He dismissed Nick's aspirations for a reunion with Brooke as a futile, destructive fantasy. "Your time with Brooke is over," Eric would state, his gaze unwavering. "Chasing ghosts will only cause more pain, more damage. Step aside. Let destiny take its course." Eric's intervention was a protective barrier erected around his cherished vision, an attempt to remove an obstacle through sheer force of will and patriarchal decree, believing his wisdom and the undeniable pull of Ridge would be enough to quell Nick's ambitions. Nick Marone, however, was a man forged in defiance, allergic to dictates, especially those delivered from the gilded throne of Forrester creations. Eric's warning, intended as a deterrent, acted instead as a potent catalyst for Nick's stubborn resolve. Being told to back off, particularly by Eric Forrester, whose world Nick had always viewed with a degree of cynicism, ignited a fierce, almost rebellious determination within him. Eric's invocation of destiny sounded to Nick like convenient mythology, a narrative constructed to maintain the status quo that often left Brooke heartbroken. Nick saw himself not as an interloper, but as Brooke's true sanctuary, a man who offered her unwavering devotion, stability, and a love free from the exhausting drama that defined her life with Ridge. Eric's dismissal only solidified Nick's conviction that he was the best man for Brooke, the one who truly saw her, valued her, and could offer her the peace she deserved. Far from being cowed, Nick's reaction was one of steely resolve. He wouldn't be steered away by Eric or anyone else. Instead, Eric's interference fueled his determination to prove the patriarch spectacularly wrong. Nick resolved, then and there, to redouble his efforts, to demonstrate unequivocally that he was Brooke's future. His plan crystallized with audacious clarity: he would seize the opportunity presented by the Italy trip to convince Brooke to marry him. He envisioned a grand, romantic gesture amidst the Tuscan hills or Venetian canals, a moment so powerful it would eclipse all her lingering doubts about Ridge and cement their future together. However, Nick, often blinded by the intensity of his own feelings and his resentment towards the Forresters, failed to grasp the volatile nature of the situation he was charging into. His resolve was absolute, but it was also perilously rigid, a high-stakes gamble fueled by love, pride, and a fundamental rejection of Eric's destiny, setting him on a collision course not just with Eric's wishes, but with the unpredictable emotional maelstrom surrounding Brooke, Ridge, and Taylor. He was preparing for a straightforward campaign of persuasion, blissfully unaware that the landscape was primed for seismic shifts. As Nick fortified his plan for a whirlwind Italian proposal, convinced his unwavering love would be Brooke's anchor, the stage was being set not for a smooth romantic climax, but for profound chaos. His vision of a sun-drenched elopement ignored the tectonic pressures building beneath the surface, Brooke's simmering defiance towards Taylor and her unresolved pull towards Ridge, Taylor's confidence, already shaken by Brooke's psychological assault, teetering on the brink of paranoid vigilance, Ridge himself, caught between the comforting familiarity Taylor offered and the magnetic, chaotic allure Brooke represented, and Eric, watching from the sidelines, ready to exert more pressure if his initial warning to Nick failed. Italy, far from being the neutral, magical setting Nick envisioned, was a pressure cooker waiting to explode. The very proximity, the enforced intimacy, the romantic ambience, all the elements Brooke had hinted at to unnerve Taylor, would act as accelerants on the already volatile emotional dynamics. Nick's shocking moves, born of his determination to prove Eric wrong and claim Brooke, wouldn't unfold in a vacuum, they would land like stones in this roiling pond, creating unpredictable ripples. He might stage an overly public declaration, intercept a private moment between Brooke and Ridge, or make a premature announcement, all in his fervent bid to force the issue. But the Italy trip, rather than simplifying Brooke's emotions, would inevitably amplify them, confronting her with Ridge in a potent setting, challenging Nick's narrative of peaceful escape. Furthermore, the promised disastrous news loomed like a storm cloud, a revelation from the past, a sudden crisis involving Hope, Thomas, Douglas, or the company, an unexpected arrival, or a secret exposed. This unforeseen catastrophe wouldn't just be a minor inconvenience, it would be a game-changer, shattering carefully laid plans and forcing desperate, on-the-fly revisions. Nick, rigidly committed to his proposal scheme, would find his meticulously planned trajectory violently thrown off course. He would be forced into reactive mode, scrambling to adapt his strategy amidst the wreckage, his resolve tested not just by Brooke's complex heart, but by external chaos. The disastrous news wouldn't just disrupt his proposal, it would expose the fragility of his assumptions and plunge everyone deeper into the emotional vortex, ensuring that Nick's quest to prove himself, Eric's campaign for destiny, Brooke's defiant pursuit of Ridge, and Taylor's fight to hold on to her fragile dream would collide in a spectacular, unpredictable conflagration under the deceptively romantic Italian sky, where magic was just as likely to summon destructive storms as tender moments. Ridge rushed to save Brooke, interrupting Taylor's impromptu wedding. For Ridge Forrester's surprise, Taylor Hayes might arrange an unplanned wedding in Italy. After all, Taylor intends to use Italy, a location that has always held special meaning for Brooke and Ridge, to persuade Brooke Logan that Ridge is hers. Italy visited by Taylor Hayes. Since Ridge is leaving on a business trip, Nick Marone has met with Tyler and extended an invitation for her to accompany him to Italy. Naturally, Nick wants Taylor present to prevent Brooke and Ridge from getting back together. Taylor initially declined, but it appears that she might reconsider. Will Taylor arrange a marriage ceremony by hitching a ride to Italy? While Ridge is at work, Taylor could easily arrange a wedding ceremony with Nick's help. Without telling Ridge what she wants, Taylor might handle all the details and then extend an invitation to meet. Will Taylor claim her man by surprising Ridge with an unplanned ceremony in Italy? If she does, will Ridge consummate the marriage? Eric Forrester intends to reach Ridge. For months, Eric Forrester has been attempting to persuade Ridge that he shouldn't be with Taylor. Eric is aware that Ridge is treating Brooke unfairly. Although Eric is aware that Ridge has feelings for Taylor, he is not at all in love with her. Eric has been told to back off by Ridge, but it isn't working. Will Ridge acknowledge Eric's correctness at last? Eric has made arrangements for Brooke, Ridge, and himself to travel to Italy for business. Ridge repeatedly emphasizes that this is merely a business trip, though. In an effort to reach Ridge, Eric impels him to think about what may occur if Brooke were to disappear one day. Ridge is certain that she will never leave. An accident affects Brooke Logan. Brooke apparently suffers a mishap that puts her in the sea while she and Ridge are in Italy. Spoilers indicate that Ridge will discover the truth and rush to save Brooke. Does the fact that Ridge and Brooke were formerly married and co-workers mean that Ridge is saving Brooke? Does Ridge eventually realize his genuine sentiments and have a revelation? Assume that Ridge finds out that Brooke has fallen into the water somewhere just before Ridge and Taylor's wedding. Without a doubt, Taylor would prefer that Ridge remain there and get married. Taylor would have to watch Brooke go to the woman he actually loves, but Ridge would undoubtedly rush to his aid. This time, will Ridge select Brooke and remain with her? Dr. Taylor Hayes's most audacious and ultimately self-destructive gamble, a desperate bid to cement her claim on Ridge's fractured heart by orchestrating an impromptu wedding ceremony, a plan born of jealous obsession and nurtured by Nick Marone's own agenda. Recognizing the peril Ridge's business trip to Italy posed, knowing Eric Forrester, Ridge's father and Brooke's unwavering champion, had deliberately maneuvered Brooke onto the trip to force a reckoning, Taylor initially recoiled from Nick's calculated invitation to join them, a transparent ploy to use her as a human shield against a Brooke-Ridge reunion. Yet, the potent cocktail of insecurity, seeing Brooke effortlessly occupying the same Italian spaces that held their most passionate memories, and the intoxicating fantasy of finally securing Ridge forever, eroded her resistance. With Nick's cynical assistance, viewing Taylor purely as a tool to thwart Brooke, Taylor transformed from reluctant traveler to stealthy architect of her own destiny, meticulously planning a clandestine wedding while Ridge was ostensibly preoccupied with Forrester Creations affairs. She navigated the labyrinthine beauty of an Italian coastal town, the very kind where Ridge and Brooke had whispered eternal promises, not as a tourist, but as a woman on a mission, securing a secluded, vine-covered terrace overlooking the azure Tyrrhenian Sea, arranging flowers that mimicked the bouquets of her past weddings to Ridge, and even procuring a simple yet elegant dress, all shrouded in secrecy designed to ambush Ridge with the ultimate commitment. Her logic was chillingly simple: present Ridge with the fait accompli of a wedding ceremony in a place saturated with his history with Brooke, thereby overriding that history with her own, forcing him to publicly choose her on Brooke's emotional turf, a symbolic conquest she believed would finally convince Brooke, and perhaps Ridge himself, that he belonged irrevocably to her. The stage was set under the golden Italian afternoon, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air, as Taylor, radiant with manic hope and trembling anticipation, stood beside a bewildered yet strangely passive Ridge, who, perhaps lulled by the beauty or the sheer unexpectedness, or simply fatigued by the endless tug-of-war over his soul, offered little resistance as the officiant began the familiar words. Taylor's gaze locked onto Ridge's, willing him to see only her, to forget the ghost of Brooke Logan she felt haunting every cobblestone and sunbeam. Yet, miles away, Eric Forrester's desperate pleas to his son, his months-long crusade to make Ridge see that his loyalty to Taylor was a suffocating obligation, a pale imitation of the all-consuming, messy, undeniable love he shared with Brooke, that he was being profoundly unfair to both women but especially to the woman who held his true heart captive, echoed unheard on the terrace, even as Eric's deliberate engineering of Brooke's presence created the very catalyst for catastrophe. For while Taylor focused on binding Ridge with vows, Brooke, overwhelmed by the emotional minefield of being near Ridge in their place, perhaps seeking solace near the water that always seemed to reflect their turbulent history, met with a terrifying accident, a stumble, a loose railing, a moment of distraction born of heartache, plunging her into the churning, perilous embrace of the Mediterranean Sea. The frantic call sliced through the serene wedding tableau like a shard of ice. Brooke was in the water, location uncertain, condition unknown, time critical. In that suspended, breathless instant, Taylor's meticulously constructed world imploded. Her eyes, wide with primal fear not for Brooke, but for the dissolution of her dream, locked onto Ridge's with a silent, desperate command: stay. Finish this. Choose me now. She might have even grasped his arm, a physical anchor against the tide pulling him away. But Ridge Forrester, in that single, defining heartbeat, ceased to be a man torn between duty and desire, between past promises and present convenience. The color drained from his face, replaced by a visceral, bone-deep terror that transcended thought, a terror Taylor had never inspired. Eric's words, Brooke's unwavering presence in his soul, the sheer, unthinkable prospect of a world without her light and her fire, crystallized in an instant of blinding, agonizing clarity. The wedding, Taylor, Nick, the flowers, the officiant's drone, all vanished into meaningless noise. The only reality was Brooke, in danger. With a raw, guttural sound torn from his very core, Ridge wrenched himself from Taylor's grasp, the force of his movement scattering petals like fallen hopes. He didn't hesitate, didn't look back, didn't offer explanations or apologies. He simply ran. He ran like a man possessed, fueled by a love so fierce it obliterated every other obligation, every other promise, every carefully laid plan. He ran towards Brooke, towards the chaos and the danger, towards the truth he had spent months, even years, trying to deny or outmaneuver. He ran leaving Taylor Hayes utterly alone on her would-be wedding terrace, the carefully chosen dress now a cruel parody, the romantic setting a mocking backdrop to her utter devastation. She watched the love of her life vanish, not towards business or duty, but towards the salvation of the woman he truly loved, the woman whose shadow Taylor could never escape, even in Italy. Ridge's frantic sprint through the picturesque streets, his desperate search along the rocky coastline, wasn't merely an act of rescue for a former wife and colleague, it was the violent, undeniable eruption of his authentic self, the final, irrevocable shattering of the illusion that Taylor could ever hold his heart completely. His epiphany wasn't a quiet realization, it was a seismic event, triggered by the prospect of losing Brooke forever. Saving her wouldn't just be pulling her from the water, it would be pulling himself back from the edge of a life lived in the wrong heart. Whether he reached her in time remained uncertain, but his choice, etched in the dust kicked up by his fleeing footsteps and the shattered pieces of Taylor's impromptu wedding on that Italian terrace, was terrifyingly clear. When faced with the potential void of a world without Brooke Logan, Ridge Forrester didn't just run to her, he ran home, leaving Taylor with nothing but the bitter taste of defeat and the chilling certainty that, in the end, against the enduring, elemental force of Brooke, her Italian gamble had been a spectacular, heartbreaking miscalculation. The interrupted ceremony wasn't a postponement, it was an annulment decreed by the relentless power of Ridge's true, undeniable love.